This episode of Lex Out Loud is brought to you by the patrons of Starwalker Studios. Learn how you can support the show at starwalkerstudios.com/support. Hello and welcome to episode 26 of Lex Out Loud, Writing Science Fiction. I'm your host, Lex Starwalker. I'm working on my third novel, my first science fiction novel, and I'm taking you along with me for the ride. Welcome to season 2, everyone. It's great to be back and back in the saddle, back behind the mic. Hasn't been too long since the last episode for you, I hope. But it's good to be back and continuing on with this show, with this project. Real quick at the beginning, I want to send a huge thank you to my wife, Nikki, for designing our new album art. Check it out if you haven't seen it already. I really love it, and it's a lot better than the album art for season 1, which was something I threw together. Although I really like the background of that one because that was one of Nikki's abstract paintings that she's done. That one's actually in our kitchen. So that was the one thing I liked about that album art. But I didn't like me being on it, and I didn't like the title, which I just did very quickly on my own, and I am not a designer. So what we have now is a lot nicer. I really like it. So thanks so much for that. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about where I think I fall on the spectrum between discovery writing versus planned writing, or sometimes called outlining. I'm starting to feel like I'm somewhere in the middle here. My last book was very much planned ahead of time. And this one I've been trying some more discovery techniques, and I am getting the feeling that I'm somewhere in between, that I'm not at one extreme or the other, that I'm ultimately going to find or use some blend of the two. So I'll talk about how I'm approaching this now and how it's going. So I started don't remember if it was last episode or a couple episodes ago. I thought I would occasionally tell you what I'm up to as far as creative content that I'm enjoying, things I'm watching, things I'm reading, games I'm playing, things like that. It hasn't been that long since the last time I did that. So as far as what I'm watching and games I'm playing, it's pretty much the same. Nothing's changed there. However, I'm reading some new books now that I wasn't reading before, I don't think. So I thought real quickly I'd tell you about those. So the first one I'm reading, which is the novel. So I usually only read one piece of fiction at a time. Nonfiction, I can read numerous different things at once and keep it all straight. But when it comes to fiction, I really like just to read one thing at a time. All right, so the novel I'm reading right now is called The Last Human by Zach Jordan. It's a space opera. I've just started it, but I've been enjoying it so far. It's a lot of fun. Here's the very long blurb I found on this. Usually these are like a paragraph, but this one's super long. But it's easier than trying to summarize it myself, and I haven't finished it yet, so I couldn't do that anyway. So here's what this says. Most days, Soraya, I don't know if that's how you say it. That's how I'm saying it. Doesn't feel like the most terrifying creature in the galaxy. Most days she's got other things on her mind, like hiding her identity among the hundreds of alien species roaming the corridors of Watchtower Station, or making sure her adoptive mother doesn't casually eviscerate one of their neighbors. Again. And most days she can almost accept that she'll never know the truth, that she'll never know why humanity was deemed too dangerous to exist, or whether she really is, impossibly, the lone survivor of a species destroyed a millennium ago. That is, until an encounter with a bounty hunter and miles-long kinetic projectile leaves her life and her perspective shattered. Thrown into the universe at the helm of a stolen ship with the dubious assistance of a rebellious spacesuit, an android death enthusiast on his 60th lifetime, and a ball of fluff with an IQ in the thousands, Soraya begins to uncover an impossible truth. What if humanity's death and her own existence are simply two moves in a demented cosmic game, one played out by vast alien intellects? Stranger still, what if these mad gods are offering Soraya a seat at their table and a second chance for humanity? So that sounds really cool, right? Yeah, I just started reading that a couple days ago, and I'm really enjoying it so far. So that's The Last Human by Zach Jordan. And if you head to the show notes at lexstarwalker.com/LOL, I will have links to all these books so you can go check them out. So that's the fiction that I'm reading. I'm reading 3 nonfiction books right now. The first is How to Astronaut, An Insider's Guide to Leaving Planet Earth by Terry Virts. So Terry has been an Air Force test pilot and astronaut. He flew the space shuttle. I know he flew Endeavour. I'm not sure if that's the only one he flew or not. And he also spent 200 days on the International Space Station. So this book is just kind of him talking about being an astronaut. And it's basically him asking him answering the frequently asked questions that astronauts receive. Anything from how do you go to the bathroom in space to how do you clean yourself or shower in space? What's microgravity feel like? What's liftoff feel like? Things like that. So I've been reading that and finding it invaluable, super interesting. And, especially for someone like me, this is extremely valuable to get the perspective of an astronaut. Now, characters in my story aren't going to be in microgravity most of the time. They're going to have artificial gravity, but I'm sure at some point there'll be scenes where someone's in microgravity. So it'll be really helpful to have this firsthand account of what that's like to help inform me, because I've never experienced it myself. And it's just really interesting to see, what he went through and what he experienced. So I'm really enjoying the book. It's really fascinating. And he starts with the training and all the survival training they went through. And yeah, it's really great stuff. Definitely check that one out. How to Astronaut by Terry Virts. Another book I'm reading is On Writing, a Memoir of the Craft by Stephen King. I've talked about this on the show before, so I won't say much about it. I'm listening to the audio version, and that's read by Stephen King himself, and he reads it very well. And I definitely recommend the audio version if you can get it. I'm listening to it again. So I just listened to it a few weeks ago, and I'm going through it again. It's just a really enjoyable listen or read to me. I was telling my wife about it. You don't need to be a writer, I don't think, to enjoy this book. Much more of the book is just kind of stories of his life and things he's experienced and kind of how those have shaped him as a person and as a writer than is specifically stuff about writing. And in fact, the part where he specifically started talking about writing is a pretty small part of the book. So even if you're not a writer, I think you'll enjoy it just to hear interesting stories of someone's life. And there's some really powerful and moving stuff in there, specifically how his wife has supported him through the years and how he probably wouldn't have gotten where he is as a novelist without her support and just believing in him. And the discussion of when he was hit by a van and what he went through with that and getting back into writing after that was really moving and inspiring as well. So yeah, this is my third time through it, and I just find it really inspirational. My process seems very different from his. He's very much a discovery writer, and that's part of the reason I'm trying the discovery writing more is I want to try doing things the way he does it. But just just hearing someone else's story of how they got into this business and kind of what their experiences have been, I find really interesting and illuminating. And finally, I'm reading The Elements of Style, 4th edition by William Strunk William Strunk Jr. and E.B. White. And this is kind of a grammar book. So it's all about how to write clearly in English and things you should be thinking about as a writer and do's and don'ts, things like that. It's a pretty small, thin book, and it was recommended by Stephen King in his book, and so I got it, and I've been reading it, and I've always felt I was very well versed in grammar, but I've actually learned some things, which honestly surprised me. I didn't really think I would see anything new in it. A lot of it really is learning about things that I've always done, and I know to do things a certain way because that's what sounds right to me, but not understanding what exactly I'm doing or why. So it's been really enlightening to learn some of these things and why it sounds right to do it one way and not the other way. So if you're serious about writing, I highly recommend that book, at least if you're writing in English. So yeah, again, I'll have links to all those books in the show notes at lexstarwalker.com/LOL. Oh, which reminds me, just real quickly, I'll mention the domain again. If you remember in older episodes of this show, the website was starwalkerstudios.com. That domain still works. I still have that domain. So any of these URLs I give you for my website, you can go to either starwalkerstudios.com/LOL or lexstarwalker.com/LOL. It'll take you to the same site. So easy peasy. All right. So today I thought I would talk about what I'm calling finding my blend. So a lot of times writers talk about this, the kind of two approaches you can take to writing a novel. One being what's often called discovery writing, which is what very much Stephen King does, where you're kind of making it up as you go along. You don't necessarily know how the book is going to end when you start it. You just have your characters that you've created. You put them in an interesting situation and you just follow that where it takes you. And you just try to be honest as far as what the characters would do, what they would say, how would they react to what's going on. And you just follow it where it takes you. And you're not planning things ahead of time. On the opposite end of the spectrum is more of a planner writer or an outliner, where someone at this extreme will sit down and outline the entire book, chapter by chapter, scene by scene. And before they start writing, they know the broad strokes of everything that's going to happen and how it's going to end and all that good stuff. So those are kind of two extremes of a spectrum. So that's like the red and the violet of the spectrum. But there's a lot of territory in between those extremes, and probably most writers are somewhere, more toward the middle and not at either extreme. They're doing some combination of the two. For instance, Brandon Sanderson has said before that he tends to be an outliner and a planner as far as his plots and the story and everything like that. However, he tends to be more of a discovery writer when it comes to his characters. So he kind of lets his characters grow and develop organically and discovers that as he goes, even though he's planning the book ahead of time. And of course, sometimes that will lead to him changing what he's planning based on how the characters change and surprise him. So that's one example of how you could be kind of a blend. So my first book, I was very much an outliner. I had everything outlined down to the scene ahead of time. And so with this one, especially since I was listening to On Writing and being inspired by it, I thought I'd try some of these more discovery writing techniques and see how they work for me. So as you know, as I've talked about in previous episodes, I've been doing the brute force writing for a while now, which is just where I sit down to write no matter what. And I just crank out my words. My 2,000 words right now is my goal, and just write something, anything. But I got to a point of diminishing returns with this. And I realized that for me personally, I needed to know what the story is about, because I started to feel like I was kind of spinning my wheels and, making a lot of effort, but not really going anywhere. So yes, the brute force writing has served a purpose. It got me writing in the world. It got me thinking about it more and on a deeper level. So I think it definitely has a place. I think it was definitely a good thing to do, and will be something I do on future projects, I'm sure. But right now, I want to figure out what the story is, and I want to write that. I'm had enough of this kind of pre-writing, as it's sometimes called, where I'm writing, but I'm not really writing something that's going to go in the book. I'm ready to write the book. I've been thinking about it long enough. I'm ready to do it. So I'm going to allow myself some time to do this, maybe a week or so, but I'm not going to let it go on too long. I don't want to get stuck in a rut or waste too much time. So as long as I'm being productive and making progress, and I can see that I'm making progress, it's all good, and I'll keep doing what I'm doing. But as soon as I feel that that isn't the case, as soon as I feel that I'm kind of, spinning my wheels again or not going anywhere, then I'll go back to the brute force writing if I have to. So what I may actually end up doing is, come up with ideas, and then as I come up with those ideas, do some brute force writing just to explore those ideas and see where they take me. So I had some issues with my car the other day that resulted in me having to walk an hour or so to go pick it up from the shop. This turned out to be a really good thing, and I had a feeling it would be. I've often had many of my best ideas while walking. And this is a thing. Many of the great minds in history, which I'm not saying I'm a great mind, I'm just saying I'm in good company. Many of the great minds in history were known for taking long walks and doing their thinking in that way. I mean, for me, if I was to try to put a finger on it, it's a combination of physical activity that is repetitive, that doesn't require any concentration, but your body is doing something, and for some reason that seems to, at least for me, help my mind kind of be free of the fetters that normally hold it down, and just kind of get really creative. Changing scenery, being able to see different things is stimulating, and fresh air is stimulating, sunshine, all those things. So I find it very helpful. Also, another great time for writing or for coming up with ideas, at least for me, is while driving. But I don't do a whole lot of driving these days. But walking is better, definitely. So I had some good thoughts on that walk and some good ideas, and I now have what I believe will be my beginning situation or scenario, or the inciting incident, as it's sometimes called. So kind of what's going to start the story, what's going to kick things off, what's going to be the change that we start talking about in the very beginning of the story. I know how my main character will become involved, why she will be part of what's going on, and how she ultimately will be able to help solve the problem, which is going to be the main conflict of the story. So I went from having not much to having quite a bit in the course of 1 hour walk. So yeah, very productive. I now know what I need from my main antagonist or my villain for the story. So I've begun fleshing out this character now. So questions I'm asking and trying to answer are: what does he want? What stands in his way? And what is his plan to get past what's standing in his way and get what he wants? And then finally, what are his skills and what are his flaws? Which is to say, what are the things that he's especially good at that he's going to bring to the table? And what are some flaws in either in his character or whatever, some difficulties that he has to overcome that, may ultimately be his undoing. I've also started making a list of other supporting characters that I'll probably need, and I can start fleshing those characters out as well. So these are things like people that my main character works with, her friends, immediate family that might come into the story, things like that. So for my strategy going forward from here, I'm going to flesh out this main conflict or a situation a bit more. So I have a good idea what that's going to involve. I'm trying to find my blend of discovery writing versus planned writing here. How much do I want to figure out ahead of time and plan out ahead of time? And how much do I want to leave kind of in the air and see what I come up with while I'm actually writing? As I said, my last book was very planned. So for this one, I want to try to go to the discovery route as much as I can just to see if it works for me. Because, maybe it will. Maybe I'll find out. Maybe I'll discover that this is the better way for me to approach things, which would be really cool. Once I have a bit of a better grasp on the main conflict or the plot for the story, then I'm going to start really focusing on the characters. I just need an idea of the shape of the plot at this point. I don't need to drill down into the specifics. I don't need to know how it's going to end. I don't need to know every scene or everything that's going to happen. I just need a general idea. I want this story to be more character-based than plot-based anyway. So I really want the plot to grow organically from the characters. So, it makes sense that I should be spending most of my time thinking about my characters and working on those and saving the plot more for the discovery writing, which is occurring to me that it's almost the reverse of what Brandon says he does. But I have a feeling there's going to be some discovery writing with the characters as well. For instance, my main character, Tia, I did have some general and some specific ideas of characteristics for her character. But honestly, really getting the feel for her and who she is came from just writing. So that was very kind of discovery oriented too. So I think the next big thing for me is to focus on fleshing out my cast of characters and getting to know them all very well. Once I have that, I think I can just start writing. I've got a shape of a plot now. I really need to flesh out this antagonist character some more and some of the supporting characters some more. And then I should be able to just go. So in summary, what I think I'm looking at here is coming up with a general sketch of a plot, which is to say a beginning situation set up by the antagonist and a good idea of what his plans are and kind of how he's going to go about trying to make those plans a reality. And then once I have that, flesh out my other characters, including the main character and the antagonist and all the supporting characters that I think I'll need. Then I put those characters in the situation, see how they react, write what happens, rinse, repeat. I think the idea I have will be great for a tight and focused story, which is awesome. That's really what I want. I don't want to write a doorstop here. I don't want to write a huge epic fantasy length book. I'd much rather put out more shorter books and put them out more frequently than put out fewer longer books that take longer to write. And I'm guessing that a lot of the readers would prefer that too. Probably all of the readers would prefer that too. So yeah, I'm really happy with that because a week ago I wasn't sure what I was going to do plot wise, and who knows, maybe I would have come up with something that needed like a ton of setup and just been like, oh, this is going to be a ridiculously long book to tell this story. So I'm really happy that what I finally came up with is not like that. And instead, it's something that I feel like I should be able to tell fairly quickly and concisely. It shouldn't, it doesn't need a lot of setup. In fact, it doesn't really need any setup, which is awesome. I can start in media res, just, like a good movie, like a James Bond movie, start right where the action is and not have, 20, 30 minutes of boring setup at the beginning of the story and have it just be really tight and not take forever to get through. And that's awesome. It won't take me forever to write it. It won't take you forever to read it. And if I keep that up with the following books, then that'll be the case for the following books. They won't take forever to write and edit and put out. So people won't have to wait so long for the next installment. So yeah, I'm really, really happy with how all that came out. And, I'm going to talk more about this in a future episode about just some of my thoughts on how the brain works and just, not only what we know from psychology and studies and research and all that, but just my own personal experience and observations as far as how my own mind works. And yeah, I'm going to have a whole discussion on that. But to me, the way all these things are fitting together now is a good sign that I'm using the right approach and that my perceptions of how my mind work are accurate. And so my strategies that I'm using based on those perceptions are actually working, which is awesome. So, I've had, and again, I'll talk about this more later, but I've had quite a few different ideas. I don't know how many, 6 or 8 different ideas that I like. And what I've kind of been waiting for is, it's like you're putting together a puzzle and there's one piece missing. And you can't really tell exactly what the image of the puzzle is without that piece. And it's like once you put that final piece in, all of a sudden it becomes clear what this thing is you've been building all along is. And that's kind of what this idea with the starting situation and the antagonist and kind of what the antagonist is trying to do. That's kind of what that was. I called it. I was talking with my wife about it the other day. It says it's kind of like the keystone of the book. I had all these other ideas that were cool, but they were kind of these almost random, unrelated ideas. And this final idea was the keystone that connected all the other ideas together and brought it together into a complete thing that uses all of these disparate ideas I had and puts them together in a way that makes a lot of sense and seems really natural. So yeah, I'll talk about that more in a future episode when I can have more time to go into that. But yeah, I'm really happy with that and really excited about these ideas I've had and how everything's starting to come together now. And really looking forward to writing this book and getting it finished and getting it out to people to read. So hopefully you all like it. All right. So that's going to wrap it up for today. Thank you so much for joining me again and for another season of the show. So season 1, I tried to focus more on world building because especially in the beginning, that's primarily what I was doing. But now that I'm starting to write the actual book, it's, there's some world building, there's some character building, actual writing, all these things. So going forward, it's just everything involved with writing this book. So we'll still talk about world building some, I'm sure, but now kind of the sky's the limit when it comes to what we might talk about on this show in the future. So if you would like to reach me, if you have any comments or questions or feedback, I'd love to hear from you. Or if you try one of these books I've recommended and you want to tell me what you think, I'd love to hear from you. You can email me at lexoutloudpodcast@gmail.com. You can follow me on Twitter at LexStarWalker, and you can call my voicemail 951-465-5391, 951-465-5391. And finally, I have a Discord server. You can join us there and hang out with myself and the other listeners and talk about writing or gaming or science, technology, whatever you want to talk about. You can find a link to our Discord server in the show notes at lexstarwalker.com/LOL. All right, so that's going to wrap it up for me today for episode 26. I'll be back next week with episode 27. And until then, keep writing.